This episode of All the Gear is brought to you by Kegland. Welcome back to All the Gear. Today on All the Gear, we are going to ferment this. This is 8 litres or 2 gallons of homemade ancient orange mead. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make it from fermentation all the way through to degustation. I'm going to compare cheap store-bought commodity honey to local grown honey, and we're going to taste the difference in the creation of this ancient mead recipe. Okay, so I want to start off on our mead adventure with the easiest mead that I could possibly find online. Today you'll need something to ferment with. These are glass demijohns or carboys. You'll need something that's roughly 4 litres, an imperial gallon. You'll also need some bungs with holes in them so that you can add an airlock onto the top of your glass fermenter. Honey, we'll be using about 1.5 kilos of honey per each ferment. And some oranges. I grew these oranges. These are blood oranges, just to change the recipe up a little bit. We'll also be using a couple of cinnamon sticks and some cloves. The yeast we'll be using is the EC1118. 1 packet should suffice between the 2 jars. First things first, I'm just gonna sterilize everything with a 70, shh, lie down. I'm just gonna sterilize everything with a 70% ethanol spray, and we're gonna weigh our honey out. We're using about 1.5 kilograms of honey or 3.5 pounds. All of the equipment that you see here today is available on the Kegland website. Thank you for Kegland for providing it. So we're just going to add in, there's our 1.5. And what I'm actually gonna do is I'm gonna fill this up with hot water. We wanna melt this honey before we add the yeast. We wanna get it up to about 30 degrees Celsius. Really? Good girl, hey? Ooh, this one smells like really nice. So this is interesting. This is like really cheap honey. And even though this was the same price as this one, this is a local honey. It's from mixed eucalyptus. This is delicious. But the other ones are they're different. So I'm very interested to see the difference between these two meads. This jar with the dimples, that's gonna have mixed eucalyptus, which I think is just gonna be more delicious. I'm interested to see the difference in flavors that come through from what I would call a better quality honey. This is really cheap though. This is the same price. It's just local honey that's not made by a corporation essentially. And there is our 2 carboys with our pure honey in the bottom. And now chop up the blood orange, and I'm just going to cut them up, rind and all. I'm going to wash out these containers, get the last of the honey out of them, then add it into each of our carboys, filling them up to about here. Mix that honey up. I want to get it as dissolved as possible in that hot water. Sorry about the rain. Now we can add in our spices, so our cinnamon and our cloves. And we can start to add in our orange slices as well. A whole orange for each of these glass vessels. I'm now just gonna fill them up so that they've got enough headroom to breathe, because it's gonna bubble over in the first few days. So I'm just gonna give these a quick shake up because I want to test the temperature of the liquid. The liquid is, 46 degrees Celsius, which is 113 degrees Fahrenheit. It's a bit too hot. So I'm just gonna let these cool. So give it about half an hour, and then we'll come back, check the temperature, and hopefully it's about 30 degrees and we can pitch the yeast. Okay, so it's been a couple of days and they are fermenting nicely, but I'm just gonna add in a tiny bit of yeast nutrient because I just wanna make sure that those yeasts have enough nutrition to make it all the way through the ferment and get through all those sugars. So I'm just gonna add in, this is a teaspoon measurement, like a 1/4 teaspoon for each of these vessels. And I'm just gonna give them a bit of a shake around to get it mixed in. And have a look at that bubbling. All right, that's great. So, you can do that again here. And I'm happy now. I'm gonna move these somewhere permanent, and then I'm gonna fill the air gap with some more sterile water and put them into a dark ambient place for them to ferment. And it has been 2 months and 4 days exactly. The recipe even says that ideally you can wait until the orange actually drops to the bottom of the fermentation vessel. And we do have that with one of them. So I'm gonna move them. Hopefully this doesn't stir them up too much. And here I can give you a kind of snapshot of the difference in the clarity. This is pretty much all down to the honey that I used, which is very interesting. This one here was the better quality honey, and this one was just the mass-produced supermarket honey. There is a distinct difference in the two. I don't know if you can actually see this, but see all of this? This is all floating in solution. So if I move this, you can see you've got particles suspended within this clearer liquid compared to this where we've got a cloudier liquid that has actually had most of the particulate fall out, but it's a more homogeneous solution even though it's not as clear. Okay, so now what we need to do is we need to rack it off, and we're gonna do that by racking it into some other carboys. You can rack it into whatever you're using to store the final product. To rack, I'm just gonna be using some clear vinyl tubing. I'm really happy with that. There are a few little bits of orange, just the cells of the orange that came through. I will say that the recipe does actually mention that you really should have some kind of filter over the end of your siphon. I should have just listened to the recipe because it's in there for a reason. You can just use a cheesecloth and we just zip tie that to the end of our siphon, like so. And we can do our second one. I found that zip tie it over and pull it forward so that you've got more mesh to work with and it's not clogging up as fast. So it's almost like you've got like a bag on the end that gives you more surface area. All right, so it's now time to taste. Here we have the local honey. They are slightly differently colored. You can't really tell. I'll see if I can actually give you a quick look from behind. I can tell. I don't know if you can tell. You can see here from my angle, and I don't think that it's definitely not the light. The local honey is like this darker, less vibrant, and this is an absolutely stunning color. So I'm very interested because there's definitely a color difference. I'd say there's also a taste difference. Now that color difference may have come from the fact that the orange had dropped out of this. So let's have a taste. So straight up, immediately on the nose, there's just this intense orange aroma coming from both of them. I'm gonna try the commodity honey first. Oh, wow. There's all of this citrus just coating the tongue, and there's a subtle honey flavor underneath. I remember a long time ago when I tried mead for the first time. I made one batch of mead when I was in my early 20s. I remember just being so surprised by how like empty of sugar the mead was, because I was expecting this like rush of honey flavor to come through, but it was really subtle, like almost like a dry white wine that had, instead of the grape flavors, the honey flavors. And this is happening again here. It's got this emptiness of sugar because it's been fermented, but left all of the flavor of the honey. But that citrus over the top, that like, and it is a very intense citrus flavor. It's like when you have a really fruity white wine, except it's not an analogy. This is actually citrus flavored. And that's delicious. I'm very much a fan of this. All right, let's try the local honey version. Let me just clear my mouth. Ooh, that's different. What's different about that? The flavor is more homogeneous. I don't know how to explain that. Instead of being like intensely citrus and subtle hints of honey, it's like the citrus and honey are working together better. I don't know which one I like better. I think this is like a more consistent drink, but I like that all of the flavors are so sharp in this. They're different, and I'd be happy with either. I think that that's the beauty of these type of fermentations though. Because you're working with such varied ingredients, you're probably not gonna get exactly the same thing as the person whose recipe it was or YouTube you're watching. They're all gonna work together to give you this unique product. Both of these are good. I actually can't tell you that commodity honey tastes any worse because it's given me a different result to the local honey. And I think that you should probably just try both for yourself because this and this, they're both great. If you've got access to cheap commodity honey, go for the commodity honey. And if you've got access to cheap local honey, go for the local honey. Now, I was gonna back sweeten this with sugar to get some of the sweetness back in, but I actually don't think it needs that. These are perfectly drinkable. If you're looking for like a comparison to a drink that you know, I would say like a fruity white wine off the top of my head, like a New Zealand Sauv Blanc. That if you replaced all of the flavor from the grapes with flavor from honey and orange, you would have essentially that kind of it's a fruity white wine and it tastes delicious. Don't expect what you pick up in the bottle as mead that's been back sweetened and carbonated. This is more in the wine category, for me anyway. And I think this will be even better chilled like a white wine. I definitely can recommend this recipe. It's easy, it's hassle-free really. I'll leave a link in the description to this recipe. Thank you to Joe Matoli for posting it. And I hope you've enjoyed this episode of All the Gear. And I hope I've left you with some ideas. Have fun fermenting, and I'll see you next time on All the Gear.